If she was still alive, Samantha Knight would have turned 40 a few days ago. Instead, she'll be remembered as the bright and beautiful 9-year-old girl from Bondi who one day in August 1986 left her home and never returned. Her disappearance was headline news around the country, but it took 15 years before police made a breakthrough in the case by charging the evil pedophile Michael Guider with her murder. Without finding Samantha's body, though, that charge was always going to be tough to prove. Eventually, Guider pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and for that, and more than 75 other child sexual abuse crimes, he's been in prison ever since. But later this month, he'll be eligible for parole. Tonight, you'll hear chilling warnings why he should never be freed from two people who got far too close to Michael Guider. Samantha Knight was the angelic 9-year-old schoolgirl who simply disappeared. 3 decades on, what happened to her remains every parent's worst nightmare.
I think it was the day that Australia lost its innocence. From that time on, people had an awareness. It certainly changed the way in which we raised our kids.
It was on the 19th of August 1986, just a stone's throw from here at Sydney's Bondi Beach, that Samantha Knight vanished, snatched off the street by the man trusted as her babysitter, drugged, molested, photographed and killed. To this day, the full truth of just what happened to Samantha remains shrouded in mystery, even as her killer now faces the possibility of freedom.
Mr. Guider is a predator. He is a repeat offender. I write with 100% certainty that if you release Guider, you are putting many little girls' lives at risk.
Michael Guider is the serial pedophile who stole Samantha's life and blighted the childhoods of so many more. Now, the very last of the children he abused is bravely breaking her silence.
I'll do anything I can to keep him locked up. He's got to be stopped. He has to stay behind bars.
28-year-old Chantel has, for the most part, been able to put the horror of Michael Guider behind her. She was just 6 years old and living in Sydney with her mum when she first met the man who would betray their trust. And at that time, do you remember being a happy little girl?
Yeah, yep. Real carefree and just a hippie kid. My mum was just a hippie mum and I was barefoot and, yeah, just happy and normal.
Michael Guider was a self-taught expert in Aboriginal rock art who worked as a gardener. Intelligent and sociable, he cultivated a warm and friendly public persona, even appearing on TV.
If I was to look for the rock art, which I have done, and there is no rock art here, well,
it was the perfect cover for his twisted double life.
But I have found proof.
So I remember meeting him.
When did you meet him?
So it was just one time I was staying at my friend's house and he was there.
Did your mum meet him?
Yes. She says after the fact, you know, she just said he gave her a bad feeling. I think it was one of those things where you second guess your bad feeling and you push it aside, and she just did and dismissed it.
1,000 years, we just merely have to turn and look towards the bush.
Michael was a very intelligent man who was able to manipulate people, and he became very good at it.
Few people understand Michael Guider's motivations as well as Detective Chief Inspector Darren Sly.
He chose his victims, the young children. He chose them very carefully. In particular, he preyed upon single parents, and he was able to gain their trust quickly and access the children, whether it be for 2 hours or even an evening, so the parent could go out and enjoy themselves once in a while.
It was a tried and tested formula, practised many times over more than 2 decades. Once on his own, Guido would drug, sexually abuse, and then photograph the children entrusted to his care.
He used a drug called Normicin, which was a drug only available to adults. He carried that with him a lot of the time in a Coke bottle filled with Coke. Once he had access to the children, he would just give them a drink. And that drug was strong enough to knock them out.
Like the minute my mum left, the whole mood shifted. That's when, you know, dirty magazines were on the coffee table all of a sudden, and yeah, he was like setting a mood.
For Chantel and her best friend in the beachside suburb of Manly, it was the start of 2 nightmarish days.
That first day he took us to a lolly shop and he said we could buy whatever we wanted, and Coke and...
Which is every kid's dream.
Yeah, it wasn't, we were just like, what? Coke, I mean, I wasn't allowed to drink Coke, so that was amazing. And yeah, and that was like, yeah, and that's ended up being where he put the drugs into the Coke, so.
So what do you know now about what he was doing?
I know that he drugged us to make it easier for him to film things with us. So...
What did he do to you?
He, you know, would just get us naked and... I don't know.
Did he touch you?
Yeah, and he'd like get us to touch each other and stuff.
And do you remember that?
Little bits of it, yeah. I remember being really aware at some point after not being aware for a while and just looking out the second story window and thinking, I've got to jump out of here. This is just so unsafe. I've got to jump out of this window. And like...
So you felt unsafe?
Really, really unsafe at that point, and I just had no way to get out, and I was just, in that moment, I just knew it was a really bad situation.
What Chantel and her friend endured would have far-reaching consequences, not just for them, but for the man who abused them. 10 years after the disappearance of Samantha Knight, and with her case still a mystery, Michael Guider's reign of terror as a paedophile was about to come to an end.
So my mum came to pick me up, and I was crying and begging her for my friend to be able to come back with us.
And why did you want your friend to come with you?
Because I didn't want her left alone with Guider. And I ended up telling my auntie what had happened. She told my mum, and we went straight to the police station.
Yeah, they laid like this, you know.
They were laying down.
Yeah.
The girls kept saying, take a photo, take a photo.
Michael Guider was arrested. In a search of his home, police found thousands of photographs depicting the abuse of 9 girls and 2 boys, as well as newspaper clippings and photos of Samantha Knight. Sentenced on 66 charges, Guider was jailed for 16 years. But he insisted to detectives he had nothing to do with Samantha's disappearance.
I met Samantha on 2 or 3 occasions. I can't really remember it wasn't an association at all, really. It was.
From that point, though, did that make him a suspect?
It certainly made him a point of interest.
More evidence would be needed before the mystery of Samantha Knight's abduction would be solved. It's kind of unresolved business for you.
Yes, yes.
For 14 years, Frank Sunius was known only as Witness O. The full story's never been told.
It was on the news, but it's not the full story. No, no.
The Dutch drug trafficker turned Crown witness, whose evidence would eventually help solve the Samantha Knight case and bring Michael Guyder to justice.
He told me, if I come clear with everything I've done, I will die in jail.
Do you believe in evil?
Yes, I believe now in evil.
Frank's story begins in July 1996 with a suitcase. On his arrival on a flight from Amsterdam to Sydney, police found $2 million worth of ecstasy tablets hidden inside.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you.
Sentenced to 11 years, he ended up in Lithgow's maximum security jail, where, suffering from depression, he became a target for other prisoners. How hard was it inside prison?
Oh, it was terrible. And I was severely bashed, and I broke my cheekbone and 3 of my teeth. I went to hospital, and when I came back from the hospital, they put me in the protection wing.
And it was there, in the protection wing, that Frank Sunius first met Michael Guyder.
But he was the first one who looked into my window and said, "Can you play chess?" And I didn't want to talk with somebody, but in the end, there was nobody in the wing, so I said, well, let's have a go.
For 8 hours a day, while the other inmates were at work, the 2 men were left on their own. As a foreigner, Frank Sunius knew nothing of Michael Guyder's crimes. But for nearly 8 months, over many games of chess, he became Guyder's closest confidant. Piece by piece, the pedophile began to reveal his crimes. What did he tell you that he did with children?
Give them a drink, and when they were unconscious or not awake, he made photographs.
Then a shocking admission. Guyder confessed to Sunius he'd picked up a child called Sam. He'd taken her to a shed and he'd drugged her. This time, things didn't go according to his plan.
She woke up because she was in pain, and she said, "Michael, what are you doing?" So she recognized it was Michael.
And what did he say to you that he did?
He gave her another drink with another tablet, and she fell asleep again.
Guyder says he left the shed and returned 2 hours later.
Then he said, "I found Sam laying on the couch."
And was she alive?
No, she was dead.
So this is 12 years after Samantha Knight has died.
I know now. Yeah.
So did the name Sam mean anything to you at that stage?
No. No.
Guyder claimed he buried her close by. 18 months later, fearing her body would be disturbed by construction work, he says he dug up her remains.
He said he put her in a garbage bin, a big garbage bin, where he always put the rubbish in. Mm-hmm. And the rubbish goes up on top, and he drove her to where the rubbish goes, and he said it was taken away. And
Frank, that little girl had a mum and dad.
Yeah, that's true.
It's horrible.
It should never happen, but it did.
By now, police were also closing in on Guyder.
Another box. Used to be a scrapbook.
They found a lockup filled with his scrapbooks, news clippings of missing children, and thousands more photos, including pictures of Samantha clearly drugged. Frank agreed to become a Crown witness. His evidence of Guider's jailhouse confession would be critical.
When Frank came forward, it gave us not only great evidence, but it gave us that what happened to Samantha. He actually gave us evidence of what Michael allegedly did with Samantha. It came from a person who never came from Australia. He didn't even know who Samantha Knight was. In fact, he only knew the little girl as Sam.
And that was significant to you because where else could he have got this information from?
Absolutely. It could only have come from the mouth of Michael Guider.
In 2002, under the weight of the evidence against him, Guider cut a deal. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter rather than murder, claiming he'd accidentally overdosed Samantha. Plea was accepted and he was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Do you believe Michael Guider murdered Samantha Knight?
Yes. He probably panicked and put a pillow on her or strangled her, or because he was in shock, because she called his name.
And that's what you think happened, isn't it?
That's exactly what I think what happened.
The public outcry.
For Detective Chief Inspector Darren Sly, there is still unfinished business in the Samantha Knight case. He doesn't accept Michael Guider's explanation about what happened to Samantha's remains.
He just won't tell us. There's a point where he just can't bring himself to tell us. That's what I'd like to think anyway.
Which suggests he's still got something to hide, doesn't it, Darren?
Well, something to hide, or he's just so scared that once he delivers that one final piece of information, he has nothing more to offer to anybody.
My name is Chantel. I was one of Mr. Guider's last victims.
Nearing the end of his sentence and eligible for parole this month, Michael Guider is moving closer to freedom.
Mr. Guider is a predator. He is a repeat offender. The only reason he has not offended in the last 20 years is because he was locked safely behind bars.
Every year, Chantel writes to the parole board to remind them of the impact of his crimes.
I can remember his assaults like it were yesterday.
The Samantha Knight case is kind of like a bogeyman, isn't it?
Yeah.
You could have been that child.
I know. No, I know. Could have easily been that child. And that's just terrifying. Thank God. Thank God it wasn't me, and horrible for Samantha and her family. But that's why he shouldn't get out.
Michael Guider may have stolen the innocence of Chantel's childhood, but she doesn't let him define her life.
It still hurts, but I've got a good life now, and you know, I forgive him because I don't want him in my life. I don't, and me carrying around a hate towards him is not letting him go.
You're worried about what friends, family who don't know about this are going to think about you.
Yes.
Why are you doing this?
Because he can't get out. I'll do anything I can to keep him locked up. I just think it's my responsibility to see it through now.
Hello, I'm Liz Hayes. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9 Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.